If you worry about freezing up in front of an audience, it's because you know the stakes are high. And as someone who's presented in front of huge groups of important leaders and delivered TEDx talks, I know the feeling when your mind starts to go blank at the wrong moment. But if you have a clear mental framework, you can pull out of that nosedive before anyone notices. In this video, I'll walk you through 3 actionable steps you can do as a leader to never freeze when you're presenting, so you can keep your cool, elevate your status, and make sure your words actually have impact. All right, to make this easier to understand, we're going to use this. A leader giving a speech or a presentation is a lot like a pilot, especially when things go a bit wrong. What's the first priority of a pilot? Is it getting people from A to B? Comfort? Efficiency? No. Every pilot without hesitation will say safety. For leaders giving presentations, the same rule applies. Sure, you want to take your audience somewhere new. Make the journey smooth, even fun. But above all, safety. Safety means trust. Every presentation must protect the audience trust for you and the organization you're leading. Lose that and your authority nosedives. That's why even the best leaders freeze sometimes when they're speaking. Like any good pilot, a great leader shows up with a flight plan. They know the route, the destination, and even the backup plan. But what if things go sideways? Like a tough question hits like turbulence or a technical glitch, or suddenly you're asked to take the wheel with zero prep. You're just sitting in the back of the plane and somebody says, "Hey, seeing as you're here, would you mind sharing a few thoughts about..." Ever happened to you? Yeah, I thought so. These 3 steps are a real and natural method to deal with problems mid-speech. Step 1. What's the first thing a pilot does when turbulence hits? Do they yank the controls and nosedive? Of course not. For a leader, the equivalent would be showing tension on stage, or snapping at a colleague, or worst of all, faking an answer. Never speak to something unless you're sure of your facts. That sounds like media training. So the first step is simple but powerful. You acknowledge the conditions. The moment you name what's happening, you stop scrambling. You're not pretending to have all the answers. You're regaining control. Think about when a pilot calmly announces, "We're hitting a bit of rough air here." Instantly, everyone relaxes because we know he knows, and yeah, we know there's turbulence, but acknowledging it makes us relax. What does that look like in a presentation? Let's say there's a technical problem, like a dead mic. You don't panic and start scrambling or start shouting. You acknowledge the issue and decide, should I project my voice or wait for the fix? Let's say you're presenting your quarterly results and a tough question catches you off guard. Don't bluff. Calmly acknowledge it and move on to the next step. Step 2. The next step is so subtle, most people miss it when a leader uses it, but that's the point. Let me take you to my TEDx talk in Cape May. I had a bulletproof flight plan. Every word, every transition, rehearsed to perfection, but preparation doesn't eliminate turbulence. At the start of my talk, I performed a piece of mentalism. The audience called out numbers and a volunteer was supposed to write them down. But there was a miscommunication, and it was totally my fault. She started writing down random numbers. For the live audience, it was a crucial moment. Handle it poorly, and I lose the room. Not because of the mistake, but because of my reaction. So step 1 kicked in. I acknowledged what was happening. I said, "Oh, I see you've started to write some numbers." Then I used the invisible move. I stabilized before I maneuvered. Just like a pilot in turbulence, you don't jerk the controls. You stabilize first. Stabilization isn't silence. It's slowing the moment enough to regain control. So I asked a question. I said, "Might I ask, do those numbers mean anything to you?" And she said, "No, they're just random numbers." I replied, "Perfect. You've shown the audience exactly what I want. When asked, just give a number at random, just like this. But let's start over so everyone can join in." That question, "Do these numbers mean anything to you?" wasn't about her. It was about stabilization. While she answered, 3 things happened. My mind cleared. The room relaxed and control returned, and I knew exactly what to do next. When a pilot hits turbulence, they stabilize before steering. If you hit disruption while you present or a tough question, do the same. Stabilize. Buy time. You could ask a clarifying question, for example, like, "Where is this coming up for you?" Or, What prompted you to ask that today? A well-timed question buys you precious seconds and sets you up for the all-important step 3. There's something that pilots learn very early that feels completely counterintuitive. Like when you fly into the clouds, your body will lie to you. You can feel perfectly level while you're actually banking. Your instincts tell you one thing, but the instruments tell you another. And pilots who trust their instincts ahead of the instruments don't just get confused, they crash. In aviation, it's called spatial disorientation. You're convinced you're flying straight while you're slowly spiraling. That's exactly what happens when we freeze. Like when you're asked a question you didn't expect, visibility disappears. You feel like you should know the answer. You feel like you should respond immediately. Under pressure, that instinct gets loud, but loud doesn't mean correct. And that's why pilots are trained to ignore how it feels and trust the instruments. Now, your instruments aren't slides or data. They're the stories you already know. 3 stories to be exact. Instrument 1 is the situational story. This is about the moment you're in right now. Can you relate the question that's being asked back to the point you were making in your presentation? Or if you're momentarily derailed by an issue like a technical glitch, can you regain the flight plan quickly by re-engaging the audience with a quick story about what's happening right now? This is exactly what I did in my TEDx example. I was able to use the mistake as a valuable teaching tool for what I wanted the audience to do. This did more than save face, it built authority. Instrument 2, the essential narrative. This ties the moment to your team or organization's bigger story. This isn't your vision statement, but a story about who you are together and why that matters. Steve Jobs did this famously when asked an insulting question while presenting.
It's sad and clear that on several counts you've discussed, you don't know what you're talking about.
He related the information that he was trying to convey to an essential story that they were trying to accomplish with the technology. I'll link his answer below. It's gold. And instrument 3 is the core story. This is your core story. This is about you, your principles, your journey, a story about who you are. You know your core story of who you are and why you're a leader, and then you can adapt it and relate it to the moment. It will enable you to orient yourself and get your presentation back on track with the promise to answer that question later. The best leaders like Warren Buffett use their own story, their core story, as a stabilizing force to speak with authority. And now that you know this, you'll notice it in their speeches everywhere. Clarifying your core story is the first task any leader should do because it's the most important instrument. Freezing doesn't happen because leaders lack answers. It happens because they don't know where to speak from. Stories don't just decorate answers, they orient them. And just like a pilot's instruments, your stories don't change just because the weather does. Knowing your core story will give you the belief in the words to fly out of trouble when it hits. And that delivers confidence that doesn't freeze. So when the pressure hits, remember you're the pilot. Acknowledge the conditions, stabilize, and fly by your instruments, your stories.